Welcome to another episode of the Empowered Half Hour. I have with me a fellow friend from Brand Builders Group. I always am like so used to calling them BBG that I almost stumbled saying their full name. But I have with me Damion Lupo, Chief Investment Officer. But I think you're going to find out that he is more of Chief Imagination Officer. We were talking a little bit before we hit record and I started tearing up. I don't even know his story yet. We're going to find it out together. But I felt like this is just going to be such a powerful episode from the un poquito that I got when I said hello. So, Damion, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited about what we're about to do.
Yeah, me too. So, when we were talking before hitting record, Damion shared with me that he's had several businesses, that he's currently the founder and, again, the chief imagination officer of a company that's almost at 1 billion. And for those of you that have either are an entrepreneur or work for a corporation, companies like dream of getting to the 1 billion mark, right? And I think it's so easy, Damion, for people to see on the surface, hey, here's this super successful dude. He is about ready to take his founding company to $1 billion. He's really lucky. People have narratives like that. But as I just heard a little bit about your story, I know that you just didn't like wave a magic wand and end up here. So I would love for you to share with the listeners and myself a little bit about your background and how did you get to where you are now?
One of the things I just thought about when you said a lot of people see lucky, they say, wow, like out of nowhere, this thing happened. And a lot of people have heard that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I think luck is a pop. It's a pop event. You have preparation meets opportunity and you mix in a whole lot of pain. And that's really what people are trying to avoid. They're trying to get, yeah. I mean, I was just thinking that just literally came up because I was like, there's a missing thing. And it's not like you've just planned and you prepared and then this thing came. Then you have to actually execute. And there's this whole, like part of the pain process for me back 25 years ago, I was building real estate and doing things, making money. And because I had this very focused me, which is very, you see this on billboards in California right now. You see like, it's me, it's you. It's like, it's just very egocentric. And that's how I operated, made a lot of money. And then because I was really not on the right course for what I'm supposed to be here on planet Earth doing, 2008 was a reckoning for a lot of people. And in my case, I lost $25 million, was homeless. And keep in mind, there was a $20 million portfolio. So I was -5, literally living in my car, freezing in the northern part of Arizona in the winter. And that whole process needed to happen. That was the pain process, the pop to get us to the point where things changed. I think you have to be willing to take on a little pain, like the greatest generation as the folks that were in World War II. You had people that were literally, in today's Veterans Day, when we're recording this, you had people that were storming a beach, becoming cannon fodder in the middle of a war, and they were doing it and they were willingly doing it and they were tough. And I think we have to find that toughness again and be willing. Doesn't mean you have to be shot at. It means you have to be willing and maybe have a little pain. And all of a sudden you do have a pop where everything looks lucky. That's the missing element, I think, for a lot of people. And that's what I've seen the last decade as things have shifted from homelessness.
With this whole pop thing, by the way, not to interrupt, but I'm like, this is incredible. If you don't use that, you should totally start using it because it's like a mic drop. For the listeners, I just want to slow down and just honor the part where you talked about the pain, right? Because losing $25 million, being $5 million in the hole, living in your car and freezing is freaking painful.
Yeah. Right? And in the middle of it, it sucks. When you're going through stuff, it hurts. Like pain hurts until you start embracing it. And I remember I heard Joe Rogan talking about something recently. He's like, man, every day I get up and I jump in my cold plunge and I've got one now. And so that's part of my routine. I'll go in there. That's the hardest, most painful thing I'm going to do all day because it hurts. Like it is not fun going into something that's 40 degrees and sitting in there for 2 or 3 minutes. But when you get used to it, then the pain doesn't necessarily hurt. You're training your body to be able to go through the things. And then all of a sudden it's funny because everything after that's really fairly straightforward and simple and is not painful. Calling all the people, doing all the work, the stuff that people bitch and complain about now, when you start off with the pain and move through it, you can train yourself to do it. And that's like a really easy way to do. It's simple. It's not easy to get yourself sitting in a nice tub, but we can find ways to do that where we train ourselves to be more resilient for all the things that we are thinking are hard, but really they're just part of the process.
I love that you're saying that. And I'm going to share a little bit about me and something new. I haven't even shared this with the listeners yet. Just like a deeper thought that has been percolating in my head, but I've had a lot of loss in my life. My mom passed away when she was 46 and I was 23. My dad passed away in his early 60s and I was 35. So by the time I was 35, lost both my parents. And then this past March, my brother tragically had a freak accident and drowned, and he was only 43. So now I'm the sole survivor of my family. And I'm 8 months into this, so I don't know everything that's going to come forward from me processing this. But what I'm relating to is that there's a lot of pain there, but I already know what I'm made of. Right. And so all I've been saying to like my business partner and people that I'm talking about kind of in the business, in the entrepreneur world, I'm like, I am turning my loss into a legacy. I don't give a shit what gets in my way. I'm like, because if I don't, I'll crumble. But if I do, I move our family forward. I change our narrative. I help heal people around me. Like we were talking before, then it goes bigger. It goes from my little world to maybe I hit other communities and whatever. Like I become of service. And I get the goosebumps as I'm talking about it because I know that people, you were saying this before we started recording, people avoid the pain, but in the pain, if you can greet it, right, and shake its hand, it has something for you. So I'm just really curious, like, what are your 2 cents on that?
I think we have a choice. A lot of times we ourselves, other people, we hear this narrative of why did this happen to me? And the simple reframe of that is why is this happening for me? And the pain is either going to debilitate us or it's going to inspire us. And it's just a question of how you interpret it. People look externally, like we just had an election and people are interpreting that. You can interpret it any way you want. You can say this is a great thing or this is a terrible thing. How is it going to be for you is entirely up to you. All these, like the hurricanes that have happened, all these things, losing 25 million. What about at first there's a cycle of grief and I ignored it. And then I was mad and then I was blaming people. And eventually I said, okay, that was entirely mine. I did that. What was it there for me to learn? And then you go through this process of being very empowered, which is the point. That's what we're doing. This is the empowered half hour. Like that's what it's all about, getting to the empowered spot. And that starts by taking total responsibility and saying, no, it wasn't the president's fault. It wasn't freaking a country's fault. It wasn't the economy's fault. It wasn't interest rates' fault. It was literally my fault. And I can do something about that. You can't change anything with who's in the White House or what interest rates are. You can't change that, but you can totally change your perspective. And then what you do next, that's empowering.
Damn, it is. I just got the goosebumps. I'm like, yeah, Damion, go. So I'd love for you. So let's continue this journey. So we started off in kind of like, what's your backstory and what did you have to overcome? But can you talk about, because we're starting to talk about the characteristics that you take on when you choose to greet that moment, right? Can you talk a little bit about what you've learned, whether you want to share some of your personal story or whether you want to share lessons you've learned, but what have you learned in facing and overcoming and choosing to overcome your situation?
The first thing is you've got to ask yourself, and I asked myself this question for 2 years in therapy before I wrote Reinvented Life. The question is, what is true? And we all have different versions. Sometimes it's objective, sometimes it's subjective, sometimes it's delusional. And one of the most valuable things you can do is ask what is true about everything that you're thinking about, and then get somebody else to give you a reflective perspective on what are you crazy, or is this actually, and this is part of having a mentor, a coach, a therapist. And the really great ones keep opening the space for you to go deeper and peel back the onions. Once you get to the truth, then you can work with it. If you're living in a lie, you can't change it. It's like the swamp of ill repair. It's quicksand. It just keeps sucking you down into it deeper and deeper instead of having a stabilizing force. And the truth can be a stabilizing force. The truth will set you free. I mean, that we've all heard that, and that is absolutely true. So you get to the point where you're honoring the truth, and then you honor the responsibility around your life. And then all of a sudden you've got a springboard for everything else that matters instead of wallowing in the past. And that's where most people spend their time. They wallow in the past and they're anxious about the future, and then they're stuck, and then they miss the entire present moment of everything that matters. And so once you shift how you interpret the world, and your own perspective on everything will change, but you have to take responsibility for that. Once you do, that's what happened in 2008. It took about 4 years for this to happen. And once that I transitioned, and my father passed away at the same time. And one of the most pivotal things, well, I'll tell you, that was one of the most powerful moments. It was when he told me that he was stage 4 and he was about to pass away. And I flew up and we had our last conversation where he was still able to have a conversation. And he made a comment to me. He said, there were so many things in this life that I wanted to do, and I'm out of time. And we just cried. And it was brutal because I saw regret. It was right in front of me. And I was like, damn, that is not what I want. It's a warning. It was not an example. And I want to share that with everybody I can and push them to take total responsibility and then design a life versus having this default that we tend to go through life tiptoeing safely to death's door. And then we greet it with regret and we say, shoot, I'm out of time. That's the opposite of success or fulfillment in life.
Yeah, no, I'm so moved by what you said because I had a different, but a final conversation with my father too before he passed. And to give you some texture, my mom and dad both were full time musicians when I was born. My dad was like a guitar god. I mean, he could do David Gilmour, Jimmy Page, like all the stuff. Like he was so damn good. But as he got older, he stopped playing as much. And one of the things he said to me, and even though I wasn't expecting him to pass away that weekend, like he thought he was going to, which is really weird because he did. And then I thought he was crazy. I was talking to him 2 days before he passed away, and he's like, I'm not making it through this weekend. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like this. And so anyway, I'm like, maybe dad had a couple drinks tonight or something. But nonetheless, he said to me, he's like, don't you ever stop. Don't you ever quit. Because I've always been a big dreamer. And that's going to, in a second, I want to transition to the chief imagination officer comment that we mentioned in the beginning. But my dad was a dreamer too. And like, he was very much like, don't you ever fucking stop. Like, don't. It was like almost a command. And I remember coming off the phone crying. I'm like, why is he saying he's dying? Why is he telling me not to stop? And I don't even know, like, I was like 35 then, raising 4 kids in middle school. There was no dreaming happening at that point in life. I was just trying to make it through the next day, but it was very powerful. And it is some of my motivators now. So I'll give it back to you and then we can transition gears.
One of the things that for a lot of people has died is the idea of imagining. It's seeing the future as bright. We've gone into the space where truly most of Main Street America is trying to survive. When you're surviving, it's hard to see something in the future because all you're doing is you're in a merry-go-round or and that's brutal. When you lose hope for a brighter future, then you start going, what's the point? It's just going to be more of the same or it's going to get worse. And we've gotten to a point where this generation is now, it's like for the first time in history, looking and saying, I don't think I'm going to be as successful or have the prosperity of even my parents. It's going to be worse. That's part of the shift, that there's got to be something. And when you imagine things, like I went from a place 15 years ago where I was focusing on how I'm going to make the next dollar, the next million. And it was about me. But it's very shallow and it doesn't really, it's like another dollar, another bottle of wine. What is that? The shift was when it shifted from me to a future where I could serve more people. And I go, wait, that's actually why I'm here. I'm not here to just be a hedonist. I was a really good hedonist, if you will, like on the scale of 0 to hero with hedonism, I was there.
We've made it.
And it's like, oh God, I thank God I'm not that guy anymore. But now it's when you shift into a place where you're asking better questions, like how can I serve the most people the deepest? And that's where things started to really change in my world, where the luck happened. It was the thinking, okay, how can I build a community and help people break their financial shackles? That was my entire focus, and imagining what that might look like for 1 million people to be financially free, where they weren't thinking about money. They were thinking about what they were going to do to impact the world. I was like, man, that could actually trigger world peace. When people aren't mad and they're not scared, they start going to a different place.
Yeah, no, you're like speaking to like every fiber in my being. Like that is just so cool. And I want to applaud you for getting there, because I want to reinforce something that you said. And this is just for the listeners. If you are feeling stuck or your future feels vague, feels like it's just going to be a repeat the year after this one and then the year after that one, Damion's message here is really encouraging you to meet the moment, come to the present, look at your own stories, unpack them, find your truth, and then start imagining a different future for yourself that's just not about yourself. It's hard. I feel too, Damion, with my own work, that when I focus on serving others, crazy, awesome, miraculous things happen. I couldn't even think of. They're not on my business plan, right? Like it came out as sideways, and it's so much cooler than I ever thought that I could have done myself. But I want that for my listeners. That's why I have the Empowered Half Hour. There's so many things I could talk about, but I love to inspire that message of hope. So I just wanted to talk to the listeners directly for a second. And I'd love for you to say something directly to them too. Like, what kind of message would you have for someone that is in that spot that we've been talking about?
I think to make this really tangible for people, if we just say, okay, think different or ask a question, it's like, okay, I got that. Now what? And then people get really stuck. And I get it. It's like, there's so many options and we end up being like a drunk squirrel chasing shiny nuts. We're just chasing everything out there. And it's just, it's crazy. That's social media in one statement. That's what's happening. So one of the things that I started thinking about this in the last couple of years, and I thought, okay, what would change everything? Well, is there a number? Like, what is the thing that changes, that creates the freedom? And so I boiled it down to these 10 steps to 10 million. And having gone through the process of going from zero to millionaire to zero and done it 4 times, and then going back to negative, and in less than 5 years going to blasting past 10 million, I was like, okay, how could that be useful for people? Here's what happens. One, when you build, you can stumble into a million. You're not going to stumble into 10 million. A million doesn't do it anymore. You can just literally be a zombie and end up with $1 million. It doesn't take that much, but it doesn't free you either. So if you're going to go to 10 million in your, let's say, net worth, there's a reason for doing it. It changes who you are. You have to build something. You can't do it accidentally. And if you're building something, you have to build something that impacts a lot of people. So it stretches you into your potential. So you end up having a lot more fulfillment versus $1 million or $2 million of success. That doesn't really change anything. And I've seen enough people with $2 or $3 million and they're not happy. They're not feeling good, and they don't feel free. So if you build to 10 million, the other thing that happens is once that happens, if it goes away, you can go build it again because you've built the confidence. There's a real reason that I wrote this quick little book people can download. And it's on purpose because it'll change who you are. If you start thinking not 9 to 5, but getting to 8 figures, it forces you to evolve into whoever you're supposed to be and really tap into your potential. And I think that that's what people need. They need to say, okay, you know what? I can do more. What might I be able to do? And then you start exploring. And it's not about being right. It's about doing something right now and taking steps forward.
I love that. I mean, you probably saw my incessant nodding. I'm like, ah, wow. There's a word that you said that I have learned too through my own success, that success does not equal happiness, right? You mentioned fulfillment and potential a couple times. Quite frankly, success, once you get comfortable, can stifle your potential. It does not equate to fulfillment. I, at one point, was in one of my peak successful moments and had an emotional collapse because nothing was aligned correctly, right? And what's good is it being successful if you're in the hospital, right? And you're still not free. So I appreciate everything that you're saying. And I can put things in the show notes, but you mentioned something about that book being downloadable. Can listeners find that at your website?
Yeah, here's the thing. There's this idea around creating a turnkey retirement. So I built this site called turnkeyretirement.com, and you can get this downloadable there. It's about creating a future that is, I want to make it simple for people. And there's these steps. It's simple, but it's not easy because you have to do the work. And look, if you win the lottery, I mean, look at lottery winners. Hey, look, I got $100 million and guess what? I'm broke and I'm in debt 3 years later. Why? Because you weren't ready. Like, you've got to build you. And so they should say, before you get your lottery and your winning ticket, you got to go build you. And people would say, no, just give me the money. It's not how it works. Like, if you want to actually maintain the happiness, it's about doing something that's meaningful and fulfilling. And one of the things when I think about the work that I'm doing, I've built this community up of people that are literally interested in designing their future. That was the EQRP community for retirement accounts, and then created an opportunity for them with something that was basically dead. The construction industry is basically dead. Nothing's happened for 70 years. There's no innovation. People are like milking their neighbors and not really innovating. And I thought, all right, that industry was stuck, like most people are just stuck, and somebody's got to come along and change and say and imagine. So my CIO role, the chief imagination officer, was to say, what could we do if we got the right people together and put the right amount of money behind this vision? And it was, we can solve the housing crisis. We are literally responsibly rebuilding America. So my MBA is not Masters of Business Administration. My MBA it's a mission to build America. And that's what we're doing. So you got to have something big. It's like what Elon does.
Woo!
It's big.
Yeah, I got goosebumps. Fist bump. That is awesome. That is awesome. Because, we need people to play big. We have, depending on what study you're reading or whatever, but I'm kind of specialized in burnout, but I got away from calling myself a burnout expert because burnout is just a symptom of something else. What I've started terming is it's a symptom of being in your unpotential. And depending on the survey results, we have 66 to 79% of America, like on average, hanging out in their unpotential. So when you talk about rebuild America, we have a lot of work to do, and we need people fighting to serve others and to get into their potential. There's such a gap. So anyway, I loved everything you just said.
Here's a trick, and it's a hack. I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss, but I'm not a fan of the idea that you can hack your way into wealth and prosperity and joy and happiness in 4 hours. Like, it's just, there's more work. The ultimate hack is the 4-letter word called work. And it's diving into something, letting yourself go into it all in, people oftentimes are trying to figure out how they're going to squeeze it into their day. And then they want to have their night and weekends for something else. And I say, you got to find an obsession. You got to find something that's bigger than you and then stop making that money, because money will end up being a side effect if you're delivering. I remember when Elon was told you're the richest person in the world. And he's like, huh, interesting. And then he went back to work. It doesn't matter. The money, I can tell you from personal experience that when you focus on something that's serving other people at a very high level and you're tapping into your potential, the money becomes this overloaded, overwhelming flood, and you're not going to be able to spend it. It's just going to keep coming. But if you start focusing on the money, then you're going to be chasing this elusive thing and it's never going to be enough. So people have to switch gears, focus on work that matters, and serve other people, and watch the prosperity come flooding at you in a way you've never even imagined.
I love that. So I have not hit 8 figures yet, but I have learned that lesson myself when I was saying, like, I hit, I had emotional collapse on the bathroom floor. I call it like hashtag my bathroom floor moment, and almost ended up in the hospital, but it was a life altering moment for me. And I realized that what I was chasing was the societal programming that I had been given: job, husband, kids, fence, dog, money. And I was relatively successful. I was making 6 figures and stuff, but I fell on the bathroom floor. That's not freaking sustainable. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to focus on my health. I'm going to focus on my family. I'm going to focus on serving others. And I think within like 4 years, I quadrupled my income without even trying. Like, it was like, that's what I mean. I was like, oh, just got another 100,000. Oh, like, not saying that again from a bragging standpoint. It's what happens when your motives are aligned in service and focusing on your well-being. So many people are willing to sacrifice their well-being for the chase of success. And that's not a winning recipe either.
No, it's because you're never going to get there. That's the thing, that it doesn't mean you don't have sacrifices, but if you're chasing it for success, like I have sacrifices, there's a lot of things that I haven't done or I don't have in my life that other people do. And I've made different sacrifices. It's not right or wrong. It's just, that's the choice. And so my life is a reflection of my choices, just like everybody's life is a reflection of their choices. And then owning it and being okay with that and saying, okay, I'm okay with the pain, or I'm okay with the years of, in my case, a lot of alone time and a lot of being in the dark, being in the Princess Bride, being out in the swamp, where you're just out there and you're hoping a giant rat doesn't eat you. There is all that kind of stuff. The question is, can you embrace the suck of that journey, or are you going to cry and curl up in the fetal position? And unfortunately, we've been trained to go into the fetal position and not stand up and go through it. And that's what people have to do. They have to get up and fight for their future and fight for their potential and stop whining and crying and blaming anybody else.
That's freaking awesome. Amen, brother. That is like, I'm like pumped. I'm like, I'm going to go out and get it today. So we're winding down to the last 5 minutes, and I can already feel your passion and how this narrative feels empowering to you. But is there anything you want to share about where you are today, how you are serving others now that would empower the listeners? So if you want to share some of your passion, or if you have another like empowering teaching moment you want to share with the listeners, but I definitely want to just give it back to you to kind of end the podcast in a very empowered state.
The ultimate freedom that anybody will ever have was something that I learned from a mentor about 20 years ago. And he said to me, you'll have no idea how free you can be until you get to a point where you don't care what other people think about what you think. And most people are so afraid of judgment. And we've been trained this since we were kids. If you have a different opinion about what 2 and 2 equals and you write it down, you flunk. And so being wrong or being different there's a judgment. So we tend to try to fall in line. And from a primal state, we don't want to step outside the lines, because if you step outside of a tribe, you get eaten by something. So when we shift and we say, okay, I'm going to think differently, I'm going to be bold, and we stop caring what other people think, there is a freedom that you find yourself in that is unmatched. And it's the ultimate sense of possibility when you're not wondering, well, is somebody going to judge me? You stop caring whether they're going to judge you. You go out there and you believe in yourself. That was the thing. If I could tell myself 20 years ago, focus on this, that's what I would have been doing. And for everybody that's thinking about, well, what is so-and-so going to say if I write on X this, or if I go after this dream or this business or this, whatever it is, it doesn't matter as much as it matters to the world that you go do that thing that you believe in. Go chase that thing and forget about what other people think, because the world is on your side and so is the universe.
Man, I don't even have anything else to say. That was just mic drop. I appreciate you being on the show so much, because I share very similar mindset, philosophies, and beliefs. What I have learned, very similar to what you were saying, but I try to live in that right action every day, and not necessarily being right or wrong, but like, hey, I want to make a difference in this world. So, you know what? I still work full time, which is crazy because I work a lot, but you use the word work. I'm not afraid to work, but I wake up because I am building this other thing. I just did it as a passion and now it's turning into a business. So now I'm going through that change of like, oh, I'll probably have to eventually retire from technology to like run this thing because it's starting to produce that amount of revenue. But nonetheless, it's like it's been so passioned inside me that I wake up at 5:30 in the morning and I work till about 8 and then I go shower and then I do the next thing. And then when I'm on lunch, I could go lunch and I could go see friends and do things, but I normally end up being geeked out working on my stuff again. So I just wanted to acknowledge everything that you've shared and then also a message to the listener, no matter where you are in your journey, you can start to take action in the direction of your potential using many of the things that we talked about. And Damion, how could the listeners stay in touch with you and follow you if they like the episode?
The best thing to do is grab a copy of that work I did, and it'll help you stay connected to me with the things that I share and the work I do with FU, my show, the Financial Underdog Show. And so go to turnkeyretirement.com, grab that thing, and you'll stay connected to me until I either inspire you or drive you crazy. So one of the two is going to happen.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I really appreciate our conversation.
Thanks so much for having me.